The Trojan Horse. The Athenians laid siege to Troy for many years, and then abruptly departed, leaving the Trojan horse. The prophet Laocoon warned the city that the Trojan horse held their doom. He hurled his javelin into the side of the Trojan horse, and was attacked by a giant multi-headed serpent that emerged from the sea and pulled he and his sons into the sea to their deaths. The inhabitants took this as an omen, to mean that the Trojan horse was a gift from the gods and thus sacred. They brought the offering inside the city gates, and at night the Athenians emerged and opened the gates to their awaiting army, and the city was sacked and destroyed, the men killed, and the women and children enslaved. The Nazi Trojan Horse. Nazi Germany personifies the technological totalitarian state and serves as a model. The subjugation of the Weimar Republic began with the creation of private militias that were used as a springboard to infiltrate the German military and finally the police force. Once the German police forces were co-opted, there was no going back. The Reichstag fire was an excuse to seize power and carry out the Night of the Long Knives, the execution of hundreds of internal political rivals, opponents, and potential threats. Once Hitler had crossed the Rubicon of mass assassination, he publicly declared his actions above the law. The pseudoscience of eugenics, the dogma of German racial superiority, and the theoretical subhuman level of other races was the rationale for wars of annihilation. Hitler's plan was to depopulate vast regions of the East and replace them with Germanic stock. Lebensraum, or living space, was the key phrase. 10 million Jews came under their geographical control, of which 6 million were systematically murdered in an effort to wipe out the Jewish race. 3 million others perished in the camps, including gypsies, Slavs, and other supposed subhuman races, as well as homosexuals, dissident Catholic priests, prisoners of war, union leaders, political opponents, Germans caught aiding Jews, religious sects such as Jehovah's Witnesses, and the intellectuals of conquered nations. The concentration camp of Auschwitz processed 4,756 human beings a day. The Nazi propaganda was so irresistible that many Jews and other targeted groups joined the Nazi movement. In the aftermath of the war, 50 million people had died, and Europe lay in ashes. The Allies wanted answers. How had arguably the most civilized and technologically advanced nation on earth descended into the pit of hell? Who were these men? Were they madmen? Worst of all, if it could happen there, could it happen here? The psychiatrists that studied the prisoners at the Nuremberg trials wrote their collective portrait. Their collective IQ is 140. They have a rigid view of the world, black and white without gray. They were born followers who needed someone to tell them what to think. Though they had unusual personalities among them, they were not insane. The answers the Allies received were not the answers they were prepared to hear. No, they were not madmen, and yes, it could happen here. The psychiatrists noted that there were plenty of similar individuals in the United States who would gladly step over half the bodies of their fellow countrymen to control the remainder. Remote viewing programs were publicly touted as an attempt to spy on the USSR using psychic powers to find hidden Russian bases and gather intelligence information. The military intelligence personalities involved in remote viewing have ties to development programs for microwave and radio frequency radiation weapons that are designed to influence the central nervous system, referred to collectively as psychotronics. These personalities have ties to religious cults as well. Remote viewing began with Operation Scanate and Operation Grill Flame, run by the NSA and INSCOM at Fort Meade under such personalities as Thomas Bearden, Albert Stubblebine, Ingo Swann, Ed Dames, Harold Putoff, Russell Targ, Paul Smith, and others. Operation Scanate leader Thomas Bearden went on to lead the American Psychotronics Association. Project Grill Flame leaders Ed Dames and Albert Stubblebine began Scitech Corporation, a private remote viewing company which holds the Smirnov patent for a psychotronic weapon. Remote viewers Harold Putoff and Ed Dames have counseled the traumatized victims of death cults and mass shootings such as the Jonestown mass deaths and the Columbine shootings, even though these men are not counselors, but physicists and military intelligence officers by training. Dr. Harold Putoff exemplifies the contradiction. He is a former NSA officer who developed the pulse microwave laser. He is a remote viewer and a high-level Scientologist who likes to counsel traumatized victims of cults. The concept of remote viewing is being used as a cover, a psychological warfare operation, in order to screen the development of psychotronic weapons and conduct MKUltra operations. The same people involved in remote viewing programs for the NSA and INSCOM at Fort Meade and Scitech Corporation are also closely tied to psychotronic weapons development and religious cults that use MKUltra methodology to induce multiple personality disorder. These strange threads, such as non-lethal psychotronic weapons development, remote viewing operations, and cults engaged in ritual abuse, are all woven together, suggesting that MKUltra and non-lethal psychotronic weapons development have evolved into an elaborate psychological warfare campaign that functions as an infiltration operation and a counterinsurgency aimed at the people and government of the United States.